Hello, everyone, and welcome to our COR live demo. My name is Martin Foronda. I am part of the EMEA sales team. Let's give a couple of minutes for everyone to join in, maybe 4 to 5 minutes, and we'll go ahead and get started. In the meantime, if anyone's already here, please feel free to put any comments in the chat. I want to think about today's session being super dynamic. I'll show most of the system and how it works, but I'd also love to hear any comments or any feedback so that we can get this being a dynamic session. So if anyone wants to start maybe asking some initial questions even before going into the demo, I'd also love to hear where people are joining in from. So I'm going to be looking at the chat, and again, let's give it 3 or 4 minutes for everybody to join in, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, there's a question here from Cheval. If it's possible to see the bid multiplier for campaigns, the bid multiplier, is that, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question, are you referring to our estimates module? Can you put in the chat a little bit, clarify just a little bit of what you're referring to? Sure. Let's give it 2 or 3 more minutes for everybody to join in, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, see quite a few people coming in just about now. So 1 more minute and we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi, Maggie. Where are you joining in from? I'd love to hear where everybody's joining in. I know that this is targeted for people mostly in Europe, but there's a whole lot of folks coming in from Africa, from Asia as well. So I'd love to hear where everybody's coming in. From Europe, nice. And what part of Europe are you on? All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hi everyone again, my name is Martin D. Foronda. I am a regional account executive on COR for the EMEA market. So that is our companies in Europe and Africa and in the Middle East. And the idea for today's webinar is to take you guys through a full demo of COR so that you can get kind of a full understanding or at least a macro understanding of the issue that we're targeting here on COR and the solution that we have for that. So I will, prior to showing you guys the solution itself, I'll talk a little bit about the agenda that we have in mind for today's webinar. So a little bit of what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about COR itself, what we offer. We're going to do a platform walkthrough. I will be looking at Q&A, so I do encourage everybody to get your questions on the Q&A in the chat, and the Zoom chat, which is right at the bottom, I believe, or maybe at the bottom right-hand corner. And I'll be looking at Q&A every 5 or 6 minutes, so I want to make sure I cover everyone's questions. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about what's COR, about what is COR. But even before that, I actually want to talk about the issue that typically the needs that typically any COR prospect has. COR is essentially a profitability and project management system. And what we're doing here is we are helping so many different creative and professional services teams to be able to understand the financial side of their business and also the operational side of the business, right? And that, of course, means understanding the real cost associated to a project, where we're over or under budgeting, if we have any cost over, any freelancers that we need in order to get projects out, well, how much time and cost we're putting into that. If we have any clients that are changing their request, all of those financial, all of that financial visibility and also the operational visibility, right? So understanding our team's bandwidth, who can take on a new project, who has more overload, where are our deadlines being pushed around. All of that, which is typically the worry of any professional services teams, is what COR's been handling pretty well for the last 5 or 6 years. And we've been doing this, again, for numerous amount of industries. And the idea is to combine all of those efforts into one, right? We hear so many different teams having all these different software pieces, right? And trying to build up the whole information and consolidate everything. And that generates a whole lot of inefficiencies. Obviously, at the end of the day, what ends up happening is we're not having an accurate understanding of where we're being profitable on a macro or even on a micro standpoint. So how do we know the way that we need to bid a project on the estimate of the time and also on the budget, right? So we're not quantifying all those hours, which is obviously the biggest hurdle for any professional services team, to quantify the hours that we're putting into it, right? So that's where COR comes in. It's a vertical solution, bringing in a whole lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence into the system, so that we can also provide extra ways into the way that we're entering our time, the way that we're estimating our time, which again, it's the biggest hurdle. I typically say it's the base of everything, right? Kind of the diagnosis of what's going on. And then with that, there's a whole lot of inefficiencies that we find. So I will go ahead and, so today we're going to talk about 4 main things. On one hand, it's going to be time management, resource management, project management, and the profitability analysis. And obviously all of these things tie up together, right? Because obviously if we're not, I think essentially what we're talking about here, it is time management, right? Professional services teams are on the time management business. If we're not being able to manage our time efficiently, we're not being profitable. And if we're not being profitable, we're having all these inefficiencies on an operational perspective as well. So it's kind of 2 things that are tied up together. So we're going to talk about time management, how that impacts on resourcing, how it impacts on project management and having visibility on what the team is on, where projects are being delayed, all of that, which obviously ends up with our profitability analysis, right? Are we even profitable? Are we servicing projects that are going to loss? Do we religiously have clients that are demanding? Do we even know how to talk to those clients? Do we have information that we can sustain in order to have those conversations? Well, all of that is what luckily we'll be covering today. So I will go straight into the software. And again, if there are any questions, I do encourage you guys to get those questions in the chat. And every 5 or 6 minutes, I'll be looking at the chat and hopefully getting answers to that. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to COR. So the demo site that I'll be taking you guys through today is going to be from a super admin. So that is someone that can see and manipulate everything within the system. Now, typically for the end user, right? So the creative, the strategist, the developer, whatever that actually might be, COR is limited to the tasks module and to the hours module. We want to give your team, in case moving forward, obviously, a much more easy tool to use, something that obviously there's going to be a lot of confidential info over profitability and cost. And that's what I'm going to kick it off now. So again, if anyone has questions, please get them in the chat and we'll go through those. Perfect. So, and just to give you a little bit of a sense, the demo that I'll be taking you through, it's going to be from all the macro stuff, so from all the big information that we're pulling out of the system, and then I'll go ahead and work my way into all the micro stuff, which is getting the information in, getting those estimates, getting all of those different time entries and so forth. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Great, so the very first thing that we're seeing here is the overall profitability of any business, right? This profitability, and obviously we're on a demo side, right? This profitability is built in by our budgets, and those could be anywhere from one-off projects to monthly retainers, out of which we're pulling out these 3 variables, and I will get into how we enter the information more towards the end of the webinar. On one hand, it's going to be the hourly cost of everybody that's going to be in the system. The base of that entry will be, of course, during implementation, we'll go ahead and set up an hourly rate into everybody that's going to be in the system. And the logic here is that as we are logging our time daily, those hours get multiplied by the hourly rate, and those go against the project's budgets, in addition to any additional costs like the vendor cost, like the client additional cost, or maybe even the overheads. So what'll happen here is these 3 variables are pulled out from the project's budgets, and that way we'll be able to understand our profitability in numbers and in percentages. And we can even drill down to a specific client, project status, or a specific time range. Now, what happens if we look a little bit towards the bottom on the same screen? We can already see a list of clients with a best amount of revenue versus clients with a better profitability, right? So for example, right off the bat on this demo site, I can already see the account Coca-Cola as the one bringing in the most amount of revenue. But then if I look at the left-hand side, you guys are going to be able to see that Coca-Cola is not one of the 10 more profitable customers, right? It's not even on this sort of top 10 listing. And I can even see that on this client profit map here at the top. It's going to be the same info. We always want to be flexible into how we're doing things, right? How we're entering and displaying the information. I am going to go ahead and take a look at the chat here to see if there are any questions. And if not, we can go ahead and move along. Perfect. All right, great. Now, let me introduce you to our insights reports, which are a series of more granular reports on a company, client, project, and resource standpoint, in which obviously the idea behind these reports is to run a much more metric-oriented business, right? I hear a whole lot on any given day that everything is kind of being done on guessing games, on tuition, both on a financial and operational perspective. Well, the idea here is for every decision that we're making for it to correlate to an accurate data, right? So the very first thing that we're going to be able to see here is our profitability in numbers and in percentages month over month, our incomes versus our costs, the deviation of our team at a company-wide level. So in here, I have a certain amount of estimated hours for all my clients and all my projects. But then if I hover through the right, I'll be able to see that my deviation on this demo site is negative. So that, of course, means that at an overall, I'm working less than I'm actually estimating. Now, if this were to be the other way around, so if in here I were to have a positive deviation, that of course means that I'm working more than I'm actually estimating. So then with that, I'm probably starting to ask myself, okay, what's going on with my clients? Where do I have those initial bottlenecks? The very first thing that I'll be able to see is the current and projected profitability of all of the clients that I'm working for, all of the accounts that I'm servicing. Towards the bottom, I can see one of the reports that I at least like the most on COR, which is the hours logged by client report, because in here, you'll be able to see that this account that we just spoke about, Coca-Cola, ends up eating up about 26% of the overall time. Now, if you guys remember when we kicked it off with the finance tab, we saw that this account, Coca-Cola, is or maybe was one of the, I mean, the first account bringing in the most amount of revenue, not one of the 10 more profitable ones, but it is the account that I do now see that we're burning up the most amount of time at an overall. So in here, without drilling down any further, we can already see at this point that we have a demanding customer or a relatively demanding customer. I mean, this is a strategic account, so we might forget the client a thing or two, right? Let me do a little bit of a more expedited run through on all the different reports we have on our clients tab. There's a lot of information, and obviously during implementation, every time we have a new client come in, we always embark on educating them on how to go about the system, different training calls. So typically our demo calls are to have prospects understand the macro of the whole system, right? Perfect. So we saw what's happening in a company and client standpoint. Now we can start to see where do we have our initial deviations. And typically on any professional services teams, whether that's a creative agency or a software development company or a consultancy, whatever the industry might be, it tends to happen a whole lot with client change requests, with reworks, with stuff that were not part of the original scope and that we need to redo. Obviously, brands are, and especially nowadays, right? There are so many different stuff that are evolving and changing that we have to redo and redo. And we do want to make our client happy for the most part. But what ends up happening is, because we're not quantifying those extra rounds that we're going through, the majority of professional services are eating up the cost. And at some point, it could be about 50 or 60% of the workload that we actually have. So the way that we go about that is, on one hand, being able to quantify all of those extra rounds or reworks that we're having at a company-wide level, understand which ones are on our end and which ones are on the client's end. And then when I actually want to get that snapshot to see which one of these clients are the most demanding with their amount of reworks, I can come in here, right? And then let's say that today's Tuesday. So I have maybe a meeting with my client on Friday, or maybe actually with the team, could be both ways. But even before meeting up with the client, I need to see, because we went into a big cost over, right? We had all these different rounds that we had to go through. But even before meeting with the client, I need to be accountable for whatever I'm going to present to he or she for that extra time that I put into the project. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and prepare myself for that meeting, for that Zoom or on-site meeting that I'm going to have. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and go into the hours reports, right? I already probably at the previous step identified that client being super demanding with their amount of rework. So then when I come in here and I want to look up that client for a specific project, right? I can come into this report and then see all the different hours that I worked for that client. And some of these items are stuff that I had to redo. So if you guys look here at the top, there's going to be the rework column that I'm highlighting. And then if we hover through the right, if we hover through the bottom, we can see that this item, this task, it's something that we had to redo, this one as well. And let's assume that these ones here are stuff that we had to redo again so that we can make this a little bit more illustrative. What will happen here is COR is going to automatically quantify that extra time and cost that we put into the project and the client. If we want to go ahead and prorate that into the fee, or talk to the team to bring that down, or talk to the client to actually bring the number down, Obviously, that's going to be a decision of anyone to make. But whatever decision we're making, we know that we're making the most informed decision, right? We're not doing an actual guessing game with the client to see what that cost over actually was. Now we're actually accountable for that extra time that we're putting into it. And we can actually sustain the conversation, which is typically one of the biggest challenges that we have when not being able to quantify any of this. I'll go ahead and take a look at the chat to see if there are any questions. Again, I do encourage you guys to put your questions into the chat so that we can, or maybe we can also do Q&A towards the end of the call. Either way, I like to make my webinar super dynamic. I'll just give it a minute for folks to get their questions in. All right, perfect. Well, let's go back into it. All right, so guys, remember that at the beginning of the webinar, we talked about a client being demanding for a series of reasons. Let's go into that client to see what's going on and where do we actually have those inefficiencies. So the client obviously was Coca-Cola, right? So the minute I walk into Coca-Cola, I'm going to see which projects require more attention than others, right? So which projects are more inefficient in a way. And the way that I'm going to be able to see that is with an emoji right next to the project's title. So it's a very intuitive, expedited way for me to get that view. So if the emoji is sad, like the AON 2022 project, that means that I'm overdue with the deadline. I'm behind my current profitability goal for the margin that I'm looking for, and same as the projected profitability. Now, if the emoji is happy, that means that I'm good with my deadline, I'm on track with the current profitability that I'm looking for, and same as my projected profitability. I have other indicators, of course, as the percentage progress of the project, the status on each of these tasks, who's taking on each of these projects. And if this is something that the client is paying as a one-time payment, as a one-off project, or if it's part of a monthly retainer, right? If it's part of a monthly retainer and I'm the person overseeing the account of Coca-Cola, and let's say that I'm a project manager, right? And I'm being asked to deliver stuff on time and with the expected quality, but also I've been recently asked to be on to monitor the profitability, to stay on budget with whatever Coca-Cola is actually paying. So if I'm looking at the account and I do see a couple of monthly retainer projects, I might want to probably see how that monthly retainer is actually performing. So let's get into the fees associated to Coca-Cola. Obviously, this in the long run becomes a negotiation tool for for our clients, because in here we'll be able to tell at an overall how this fee is performing, right? So how the overall contract is performing, understand its profitability in numbers and in percentages, see the time that we estimated versus the time that we actually worked on, all of the different projects that are eating up money from that, again, the overall contract. And then when I actually want to see the breakdown of a specific month, because obviously I need to understand how those 5,000, 10,000 euros, pounds, dollars, whatever it actually was, how that allocated month over month. I need to see how that money performed, right? And where was it efficient, and where did it go to projects that went to loss? Well, easily in here, I'll be able to identify that information wherever I have projects that that are marked in red, that of course are inefficient because they're not being profitable. I can easily go into those projects, right? So for example, if let's say that the branding project that I have in here, I identified that it was an inefficient project, I can go into the micro detail of that. So again, we saw inefficiencies at a macro level at the beginning of the webinar. Now we can see that on a micro standpoint. So I can see by hovering through the profitability tab in here, where those inefficiencies actually happened. So I can see my historic, current, and projected profitability, and then towards the right-hand side, see the tasks that have the most amount of deviation. So this is a great way for me to see, on one hand, if I am bidding projects on the real costs associated to them, so I have more understanding about that. estimate the project correctly so that I'm on budget on one hand, and obviously for me not to add an extra layer that's gonna overload the team, right? Because obviously if I'm misestimating my projects, then I need to have more resources in order to handle the project itself. And then that becomes another bigger challenge because I'm overloading the team. I'm not getting deadlines out. So all these different consequences, right? So again, I'll be able to see the task that had the most amount of deviations with the time that we estimated at the beginning and the time that we went over in its numbers and percentages. Perfect. All right. Now, let me take you guys through sort of the base of everything on how we start standardizing our offering, how we start automating our processes so that we're not creating tasks religiously, so that we're not creating projects all the time. And for that, I'll go ahead and take you through our project templates menu. Again, templates are great ways for us to, on one hand, decentralize know-how processes, having faster time to markets, being able to predict our earnings, right? So there's a whole lot of value added when we templatize our offering, and that's something that we handle during implementation. It is one of the first steps. And I can easily do that by setting up different tasks or steps to go through with start and end dates. Each of these different tasks may have different layers of info. So in here, I can indicate if this is a parent task or who's going to take on the task itself or the amount of estimated time. So there's a whole lot of different pieces of information that I can fill out on the template level, right? So then when one of my clients comes in and they want us to go through that ad campaign, but again, we've already done for hundreds of other clients, and I don't want to be religiously burning up time and cost from the team and handling those administrative workloads. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and come in here and select the banners display template. I'll give this out to just a random name. So let's do webinar November 15th so that we can easily identify the project later on. I'm going to give this out to Coca-Cola, the client that we just spoke about. If I need some further info, I can come in here and indicate a start and an end date. If there are any deliverables, I can get those in there as well and then report towards that. If this is going to be a monthly project, I can get the frequency in. And what the system is going to do is at the beginning of each month, it's going to recreate those tasks for me so that I'm not religiously creating the task. Then I'm going to come in here and pre-assign my resources. So instead of trying to figure out what the team is on, who can take on the project itself, trying to look at Google Calendars or Outlook or however I'm trying to figure out availability, I will come in here and kind of get a preview of what the team is on. So for example, I can get Nicole in here. And if I hover through Nicole, she has a 7% availability for the next 15 days. And I can also get my creative department. That could also be obviously my testing or my UX or my front end, whatever the department I actually have, that is also part of the implementation for us to set that up. And then in here, I'm going to come in and indicate how the client's going to pay. Is this going to be a one-time payment? Is it going to be from a monthly fee? If it is going to be that way, I'll go ahead and get the fee in. We can do our time estimate. It could be a round number. It could be by positions, by categories, and then understand the amount of time that each bucket, for example, if I am a software development company and I have 40 hours of testing and another 30 hours of UI and UX, so I can get those buckets in and then see how much time of those categories I actually spent on. So there's quite a few different ways for us to do our time estimate. So I fill out the whole thing. And then once I do that, I go ahead and create the project. So what's happening now is, on one hand, we're automating the process. Users are getting notified of their upcoming workloads, and those notifications are being sent both via email and through the system, as I'm going to be showing in now. Right, so this looks very similar to social media, where I'm going to have the bell with a ding in there at the top, and then I'll be able to see all the different notifications that I have. On the profitability side, I can already see how my how my projected profitability is going to look like. On the operational side, if I'm working with any predecessors or any dependencies, I can look at the project's timeline, and if stuff needs to get moved around, I can easily do drag and drop movements, right? So that way, I'm making sure that I'm actually hitting the deadline. And then obviously, in here, which is the typical project layout, I have about 2 different tasks that haven't been assigned to anyone yet. Obviously, not every project that we go through is a replica of what we have done before. So stuff can get archived, can be created new, or we can reassign stuff. So then before actually assigning these 2 tasks, the campaign report and the content creation one, out to anyone, I actually want to see what they're on, right? I need to understand what the creative department team that I just sold to a client is actually on. And in order to do that, I probably saw their macro availability on the metrics menu, right? Probably on the insights report, there's quite a few different reports that'll give me answers to understand the overall bandwidth. But then when I actually want to get my hands on to start moving all those different pieces and balancing out the workload, I'll go into the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart is something that I can see, and it's a super helpful tool, right? It could be seen on multiple perspectives. It could be at a company-wide level, at a client standpoint, project. So I can go ahead and kind of apply the filters that I actually need to work on. So in here, for today's demo, I'm looking at the creative department, right? And right off the bat, even before making any movements, I can already see that I have a couple of individuals from the creative department that are overbooked, right? So Travis, Sam, and Tamara, these individuals have all these different tasks to go through. So now I understand the reasons why they're overbooked, right? Color coding is obviously indicating the status on each of these tasks. But then if you guys take a look at the bottom, you're going to be able to see that we have another resource from the same team that is much more available, right? So Nicole only has the campaign implementation task. So what I can do in here, and if the nature of my business allows me to move stuff around from one person down to the other, I can easily do that on COR, right? So I can do simply just some drag and drop movements, right? So that's going to take the load off of Tamara a little bit, and it's going to start to get Nicole a little bit more booked. So now Nicole starts to look a little bit more orange on her avatar. And if something needs to get pushed out into the future, like the campaign task in here, I can easily move that item into the future. And that's going to be sending notifications to everyone of what I'm doing. So again, on one hand, I'm understanding at that micro snapshot of what the team is on. I can see who can take on a new project, who has more overload than others, which obviously overload, it's not just affecting my numbers, but it is affecting the team's health, right? We see a whole lot in the professional services industry that obviously because of this sort of lack of visibility into where time is being spent, that generates a whole lot of overload. And overload generates obviously unhappiness from the team, therefore employee turnover. But for us as an employer, that's even a bigger challenge. Now we need to look at someone to hire and to onboard that person, and that's even a bigger cost over. So luckily in here we can get that snapshot to understand where the team is on, and always making sure that we're balancing out those workloads, right? I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat again to see if there are any questions, and then we'll go ahead and move along. All right, perfect. Well, let me show you guys a little bit of how this looks like for the end user. So the end user is obviously the person executing the task, right? And that could be a developer, that could be a consultant, that could be a creative, that could be a strategist. It could be so many different roles. And again, when any of these roles come into the system, they're looking at COR, with two main menus. It's going to be the tasks module and the hours module. So that way we can give the end user a much more easy tool to use. And there's a couple of different ways of us seeing our upcoming workloads. It could be on a list view, or it could be on a Kanban view. Some individuals, again, we want to give enough flexibility into how we're doing things, right? So some individuals love to move those cards as they progress into the funnel. I personally, whenever I'm assigned a task on COR, I like to see it more on the My Tasks menu, which is the way that I showed it at the beginning. Because obviously this, to me at least, gives me a much more sense of priority and what's coming first down the pipe, right? So for example, the copywriting task in here, it's overdue. And let's say that this is marked as a low priority. This could be easily marked as urgent, right? So if that's the case, I can come in here and move this over to the top, right? And then when I actually, so now I understand what's the first thing coming down the pipe. So now when I want to go into the task and I go ahead and open the task itself, I'll have a couple of collaboration tools. On one hand, it's going to be a briefing. There could be a checklist or a subtask. There could be messages exchanged, and I can send, for example, I can hashtag someone and say, Nicole, please update. Gosh, my typing is awful today. Please update the banner, right? So I go ahead and get that message in. And then maybe the client comes in and says, hey, you know what? I need you guys to redo the banner because instead of being with a orange background, I need for it to be green. Whatever that actually is, I can come in here and mark that client change request, and then again report towards that. And obviously there could be files picked up from Google Drive, OneDrive, or Dropbox, right? And then in here is where we're typically going to handle our time tracking. We know firsthand that obviously time tracking is a big hurdle for any professional services team. There's typically a whole lot of pushback in handling this because of all these different manual ways to get it done, right? Luckily on COR, we've built a whole lot of different algorithms powered by machine learning and artificial intelligence that obviously look a little bit into what the end user is doing, so that we can give that extra cushion, right, of validation for the time that we were actually on. But even before, typically what we do during the implementation, even before showing the end user of how to log he or she's time, what we actually do is talk a whole lot about the value added for that person. And again, that typically starts with 4 entries of time on where that time is being spent. Therefore, whoever is on top of that person doesn't really know how much that person actually takes for their tasks. So stuff are getting misestimated. The project's not going up. The project's over its budget, and then the resource now got overloaded. So there's a whole lot of value added into communicating effectively to the people that are going to be using the system for the majority, on understanding why we want he or she to use the system. We're not looking here for this just to be an order for management down to the team itself. We want this to be a communication where everybody understands the value added into being on the system, right? So now, when we come in and want to handle our time tracking, the task that was estimated 10 hours, I can come in here and do an expedited log or a personalized one. And I can say that I was 4 hours here. Obviously, when I punch this time in, that impacts on my profitability and on the productivity of the project that I'm working for. If I'm a big multitasker, I might want to probably punch in the timer. And even if I close the task out, the timer will always be at the top. Or another great way is to say, okay, you know what, the copywriting task is now finished. And then COR is going to ask how much time I was actually there. And I can say that I was another 4 hours, right? Now, another great way for us to finish up our time cards is to look at all the hours that have been suggested. And this is something that works with, again, a lot of AI and machine learning processes that are looking at different behaviors of the end user, the time that we were on a task and the time that we clocked out, the time that we're on versus the time that we spent in the past. So there's a whole lot of different variables, and obviously it's a machine learning process, right? So the more that we're in the system, the more information that we give it, the more that the system has in order to make smarter suggestions, right? So if, let's look at, for example, last week. I should have some suggestions in here. If any of those, let me just probably backtrack. Looks like I already validated most of my time, but I'll show you a little bit into maybe last month. Here, for example, so on Wednesday, November 2nd, the system detected that I was an hour on the copywriting task. So all I have to do, if that is correct, is to punch in that blue bubble in here, and then that time gets entered, right? If something needs to be edited, so we do want that human side of validation. If something needs to get edited, I can come in here and say, hey, you know what? Instead of 3 hours and 58 minutes on creating a banner, I was actually 4 hours and 58 minutes. So it does have that sort of human side of it for us to be able to validate our time. And again, obviously, in order to implement the system correctly, every time we have a new client come in, we always embark on an implementation process. A lot of times it's a change management process that sort of varies depending on the maturity and the size of our client. It is a change, so obviously there are a couple of things that on a management perspective might change. We want to positively change some of those inefficiencies, right? But I do want to point out what it says here, that we're more than just a software. We're not just gonna, hand out COR and here's the system, knock yourselves out. We're not gonna do that. Obviously, we are gonna be becoming a strategic partner of you guys in the long run, right? We want to be there, the ones raising up our hands and making suggestions and monthly, in a proactive way, reaching out monthly to see how you're using the system, to make sure that you're outgrowing the solution, to make sure that you're using it correctly. So all of that is going to happen, right? So there's a big combination between the software itself and the human side of it, which is mainly our professional services, all of the consultancy that goes around the system or the solution itself. Obviously, there's a whole lot of different support options, a whole lot of different training ways. That could be with one of our customer success managers. It could be with webinars like the one that we're doing now. It could be with tutorials, with articles. So there's a whole lot of different channels in order to onboard and obviously reach the goals that that typically we talk about during any demo call. So again, I will look a little bit into the chat in here to see if we have any further questions. I had a question from Cheval at the beginning of the webinar about bid multiplier for campaigns. I think you were going to clarify that question. Were you talking about being able to estimate that bid? I'm not sure if that was the actual question. I'm gonna give it 2 or 3 more minutes for everybody to have a chance to get questions in. Not just questions, but also overall feedback. I always like to hear a little bit about how the solution looks like. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining in. We got in the chat box a couple of case studies in there, so I do encourage you guys to take a look at those. The idea, obviously, after this webinar, if anyone here would like a personalized demo, please reach out to us. Our website is projectcore.com, so please do get in there to make any to ask someone from our sales team reach out, and hopefully we'll be able to talk soon. All right, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.